So today I'm going to take this time to reflect back on some of the big takeaways from season two to get you thinking. Again, maybe the goal is that you'll have a little shift at the end of this. You'll see something in a new way. You'll see manifestation a little differently. Maybe you'll think about relationships, the relationships that you're attracting. You'll maybe feel or have a different perception of the importance of safety and the idea of body awareness, our body speaking first. Her new lens is getting you to see a situation in a new way that's more aligned with your truth. And you know it when you hear it, when you see it, because it resonates deeply. So let's talk for a minute, just in general, about what this season revealed. The first one I'm going to start with is about a manifestation topic we got into about the nervous system shapes perception before the mind interprets experience. So, how our nervous system is becoming such a primary topic in all areas of wellness, relationships, because we are recognizing the power of our nervous system, how it is an entity unto itself that is in many ways navigating our lives. It's directing us towards certain people, away from other people. It's impacting the way we process and experience everything in our lives. And when it comes to manifestation, how the nervous system can hijack the manifestation because it is not safe. If it doesn't feel safe, we can't even download what's meant for us. So that was one of our topics. Another one is about emotional safety and how it changes what we are able to see in relationships. So this is about the secure attachment episode and how what that feels like might be very different than what you're used to. If you're anything like me, that was not something that I was comfortable with for many years, most of my life. But really, that's where all the good stuff is. So it's a more calm and relaxed feeling than that super intense dopamine charge. So that was an area we talked about. And then we talked about how intensity and familiarity are not the same as alignment. We talked to a global matchmaker about this and how alignment is deeper. And we're looking for a deeper alignment with someone, not just the external intensity that sometimes we think we're looking for. That was a very interesting conversation. We had a talk with a burnout expert about how burnout comes from living inside inherited standards. We don't even realize sometimes the standards we're upholding that are extremely high and really challenged. So we talked about how getting to know your own standards, the way you experience things, and how where you really are, and really understanding that can hold the key to preventing burnout. We talked about slowing down and how that allows perception to reorganize. This is from the Huga episode. That was the trip to Copenhagen I took, and how I was so overwhelmed and completely blown away by the energy of peace, calm, tranquility in Copenhagen. And then one of my favorite episodes of season two was about healing involves allowing the body to update old information. I talked to a woman who is an incredibly gifted healer. She talked about somatic healing. The body has the answers first. We have to feel it first in our body before we can feel it outside of us. We need to feel it inside of us. And it's just a really beautiful through line throughout this whole season. So basically, what we're saying is we often think change requires effort, but often change begins with seeing clearly. So all of these areas were kind of along that line. We want to work on seeing things clearly and seeing things in a new way, seeing these patterns in relationship, seeing how our nervous system's impacting us, seeing how alignment is more important than intensity, seeing how really understanding ourselves uniquely can be the secret to preventing burnout. These are all just ways that we can see a situation differently, and then the thing becomes different, which is a reminder again of the whole inspiration for this podcast. The quote by Anais Nin: "You don't see things as they are, you see them as you are." So when I can see it differently, it is different. And that doesn't mean it's a bypass of learning and growth and sometimes sadness and all the feelings. It just means that there's a possibility that through that, I'm going to walk away and see this whole thing differently. And that is the gift. And that is a gift that can also be reflected back on ourselves. And after processing things and working through things, we can say, you know what? I see myself differently. I see what I deserve more clearly. I'd see my value more clearly. And that's all the reason for doing this podcast. So I'm going to continue on now to the next section about why we keep wearing old lenses. So the last episode before this one is about the lenses we inherit, which is again going back to that really important baseline for this work and for the new lens method, which is the method I work with my clients on. In the very beginning, what we do is look at what are the lenses you're seeing through now. And it's astonishing how many people who've done so much work on themselves are still not clear on what they're actually seeing, how they're really seeing situations, how they truly see love relationships, how they see their future, how they see this vision for what they have, and they don't even realize how limited it is based on some lenses that were given to them, they may have inherited or just acquired over time. And we're going to talk for a minute about why do we keep wearing those old lenses, even when we know on some level they're not beneficial. So this goes to an episode this season about manifestation and how the brain prefers the familiar even when the familiar is limiting. That was a really intriguing episode for me to work on because, again, going through it, seeing how the brain prefers the familiar even when the familiar is limiting. It's just very, very important to see how much our brain can stop us and how for us to get a different endpoint, we have to go into something unfamiliar. So if we want something different, if we want that relationship that's different than anything we've had before, then we have to reach beyond the comfortable and the familiar. And then how our early environments teach us what feels normal. And that's where, again, earlier in the season, we get into this, but we're talking about how there's imprinting. And when you're young and you're looking through your lens, so much of what you're seeing is imprinted on by the caregivers of your early life, like under the age of 6. And just recognizing that gives a little bit of a gap between the lens and you. You think, wait a minute, is this really how I see, or is this the dominant experience of my caregivers when I was young? And when you start to recognize that that is definitely not coming from you, that's when you can begin to choose a different lens. But just understanding that our early environments have that much of an influence is part of the messaging of season 2. And another one is the nervous system prioritizes predictability over expansion. So our nervous system is comfortable with what it's comfortable with. And that's challenging because, again, we want something different. If we're happy with what our nervous system's attracting, then we don't have a problem. But if we want something else, we need to work with our nervous system to, again, reach beyond the comfort zone, go beyond it so we can attract something bigger, better, more aligned with us. And just the importance of seeing how, if you're not doing this work, you're not likely to question what you're seeing because it's so close to you. It's so much part of you. It's so much comfort with it. We even get comfortable with fears. We get comfortable with really unproductive feelings and thoughts because they are just part of the fabric of our early life, and it becomes part of us. And actually, maybe in some cases it's a good thing because there's so much love and connection and understanding and comfort that we want to hold on to it. But if it's not yielding the results that we want, we have to take a moment to look at it again and say, wait a minute, is this what I want? And question, is what I learned earlier really helping me at this moment? So, kind of a summary of findings from this section about old lenses is we don't cling to old perspectives because we're resistant. We cling to them because at one time they helped us to belong, to feel safe, to make sense of things. You know it needs to change, you know it's not working. But acknowledging, like, I'm just comfortable with this way, that's a big part of it, is just seeing it for what it is. Okay. Kind of the arc of this season was about seeing the lens is there, learning about how we inherited a lot of the beliefs, and then recognizing, wait a minute, we do have a choice. We do have a choice. We're not stuck with these lenses. So it's a shift into empowerment. And what changes when we feel empowered? So now we know the lens is there. Now we have an awareness. I have a choice about how I see through this lens. So it's noticing a thought without immediately believing it. So that if there's a thought in that lens, do I believe it or do I not? Am I willing to take a step back from it? Am I willing to maybe choose a different thought? Another one is recognizing emotional patterns without assuming they define you. Questioning interpretations, allowing for more than one explanation for an experience. And then another one is becoming curious about reactions instead of judging them. So taking a moment, again, it's all about that gap between seeing something and judging, reacting, responding. And seeing that perception is malleable, just like the nervous system, just like even our brains, the way we think, the neuroplasticity, we can change our perception. The thing I love the most about this work in the New Lens Method, it can happen fast. You can do this work on a certain subject, a certain topic. Maybe there's someone in your life who's really difficult. When you work this method, by the end of even one session, you might see that person differently, completely differently. And that changes everything. It can really be quick. It's almost like when you see the elephant in the room, you can't not see it. It's like that. It's like if you're thinking, oh, this person's so difficult, and you do the work and you start to realize, wait a minute, this person's actually struggling and they have a lot of issues, and I'm taking this very personally. And all of a sudden, it's like you don't feel that way anymore. You don't feel triggered by that person anymore. You don't feel threatened by that person. You actually might even shift into feeling more compassion for that person. That person is struggling, and that is why their behavior is what it is. So that's like a tiny example, but there's a lot of power in recognizing you have the choice. So knowing that perception can be changed. And a little side note here is that choice rarely arrives dramatically. It's mostly like a small pause, thinking, and a willingness to consider what else could be true here. It's that little pause between you and that lens that's so deeply ingrained. The next one is choosing compassion. I kind of alluded to that just before this, but putting some compassion there between yourself and that lens. So even just a small change in that lens and the space between you and the lens, and a small difference can make a very significant external change in your life. And how sometimes the most powerful shift is not assuming the first thought you have is the only one available to you. So I know I just threw a lot at you here, but we are building an entire collection of material that you can go through. And what is the topic that's upsetting you? You can find it in there and see if it can help you to get that little shift you need so that you see that situation differently, and that little shift 1 degree can make a big difference over time. So I know there's a lot of information, but I wonder if any of these topics are hitting home for you. Where are you right now? What in your life do you wish you could see differently? I'm going to now, though, ask you some questions I want you to think about for reflection, kind of summarizing season 2, some of the major thoughts, and I'm going to give you some questions now. Where in your life have you been seeing yourself through an outdated interpretation? Where might your past still be quietly informing what you expect? What assumptions about yourself might no longer be true? Where are you being invited to see with more compassion? And that goes both ways, towards yourself and towards everyone in your life. Could be your partner, your parents, your child, your neighbor. Where are you being invited to see with more compassion? So, what do you think? I hope this episode hit home for you. I know for me, it's been a really exciting and inspiring season of content. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have. If this season has explored anything, it's many of the ways we see ourselves were never consciously chosen. They were absorbed, learned, and repeated, and often reinforced by environments that did not always reflect our value. But the moment you begin to recognize that you are not required to continue seeing yourself through outdated assumptions, space opens. And in that space, something new becomes possible. A different relationship with yourself, a different experience of love, and a different experience of what your life is allowed to have. Not because you force change, but because you allow yourself to see differently. Thank you for being part of this season of Her New Lens. If something you heard here resonated, you may wish to revisit the episodes that felt most meaningful. Often what speaks to us once speaks differently when we return. And as we move into the next season, we will continue exploring what becomes possible when perception shifts, when safety deepens, and when the way we see ourselves begins to align with who we are becoming. Until then, be kind to yourself with what is still coming through. Sometimes the most meaningful change is realizing that the way you have seen things is not the only way they can be seen. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in season 3.